We'll turn to you. I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest in studio, always my preference, in studio. We have filmmaker Curtis Bowers. And I think years ago, I was trying to remember this. I think you were on my show years ago. We were on radio at Salem. But in any case, he is a filmmaker. He's a former state legislator. He's a filmmaker. He's got 2 films. One is Agenda 1, and the second we're going to talk about today is Agenda 2. Both the Agenda 1 talked about the idea that the history of Marxism, as we see a rise in Marxist ideology in America, really is not a product of new modern thinking in America, but actually has deep and long-term threads. But he's back with Agenda 2, so we're going to talk about today a little bit more about connecting Marxist ideology with the ideas being pushed by today's left. So Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So glad you're here. And I want to jump right in. Actually, first I want to go to Agenda 1. And that was, I've forgotten the year it came out, but it was during Obama, right?
2010.
2010. At that time, we did this in our home, buying the video and inviting friends to come over and watch. That was kind of fun because you could watch and get a little alarmed and you could talk about it. But it was really the basic idea of the Marxist roots that we are now seeing more prevalent in the Democrat Party, having a long-term history in America. So can you give a quick summary of that?
Yes, Agenda, Grinding America Down was the first film, and we're still having thousands of people have showings weekly in their homes still, because there's so many people that don't understand what's going on. It just gives you the history of how we've gotten to this point.
Yep.
And like most things, when you first notice the symptoms, that's not when the problem started. It's been 100 years in the making, where they've been marching through the institutions of influence so they could change us as a people from within.
They being communists, would you call it communists? Or?
Yes, it's the Marxist philosophy from the Frankfurt School and the Fabian Socialist Society, and they're all socialists. They push for socialism because just like Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union, he said socialism is the road to communism.
Yes, he did.
and it's even the dictionary, secondary definition in the dictionary, since you were talking about that, it says a transitional social state between the overthrow of capitalism and the realization of communism. That is what it is, because it cannot last, because it does not work. Like Margaret Thatcher told us, you eventually run out of spending other people's money, because when you penalize those that are productive for being productive, slowly they become less and less productive. So you do run out, and that's when socialism turns into communism, because then those in power don't want to lose their power, so the guns come out. And they realize, we're going to make you work now, since everyone's getting so lazy. We don't even have any money to share anymore. And so it collapses on itself. And it's what always happens. It's what's been happening in Venezuela right now. It's the end of the road of socialism. It's either going to go into full-blown communism, or hopefully the people will be able to take back their country. And if they do, you will see they will have the most free market in the world, because they will realize we've already been there and done that. And the socialist sounding ideas that are very appealing to young people, because they're naive in how the world works, they won't be suckers for that again.
Well, I love, actually, my last question was going to be, how hopeful are you, or how do we get out of this? And it is true, I guess, if we get to the point that Bernie Sanders were to win, which, heaven forbid, but if we get to where the point he wins, I like the thought that maybe after people watch the economic decline, the economic ruin, the refusal of people to work hard to produce, which you're exactly right. What happens is government, the people who love this power, the socialists who love being in power, and love somehow having convinced people, don't worry, you won't have to do very much. You'll get free healthcare, free housing, free education, everything's free. And these people right now buying into this Bernie Sanders our argument, they just don't know any better. They think somehow the reason that they don't have enough to pay off their student loans, or they don't have enough, is because the rich people won't share their money. I mean, it's the most, and it's really a condemnation of the American education system that we ever got here to this point.
Exactly. They've been taught K through 12 and then in college that the economic pie is fixed. So if someone is rich, that means someone else has to be poor. But we, of course, know, anyone that understands economics and free markets is, no, wealth is created. Every time someone is creative or works hard at something, more money is created. So there's no limit to the amount of money that can be created. So everyone could figuratively be rich if they all worked and were diligent and faithful to do that. And they're taught the opposite. So but they teach that so they can use the poor. Okay, they don't want to help the poor. They want them to stay poor so they'll vote Democrat.
Right.
They want to use the poor, so they tell the poor, do you know why you're poor? Because that guy's
guy
rich.
over there.
Because
Yep.
that guy's rich. And so they're like, oh. And they don't know. Again, the schools have been so pathetic. They haven't taught them the truth. And so, okay, I guess that's okay. But here's the thing so evil about Bernie Sanders.
A lot of things, but go ahead.
Many things. But for him to be able to persuade some of the millennials that this sounds like a good idea, that doesn't bother me about them. They're young and you just think everything's possible, whatever. But it's evil of him because he's old enough to know it's a dead-end road. He knows socialism does not work. He is a Marxist revolutionary. If you study his life, yes, all he has been is an agitator, milking the system, using other people to try to stir things up, to get the socialism, which will eventually bring the communism. It always does. And so he is so evil because he's lying to those young people to get them to jump on his little bandwagon.
And I was interesting of the clip I played earlier. I couldn't play the whole long thing, but there was a point in this interview where I'm sorry, it was a different clip. But anyway, he was asked shortly after the State of the Union, well, President Trump said there will never be America will never be socialist. How do you want to answer that? And his answer was, instead of saying, yes, socialism is a great thing, we're going to do it, he's very cautious. He said, we are going to have a country where every single person has all the health care they need, and it won't cost them anything, and they're going to have housing, and they're going to have education, and they're going to, and he went through his whole litany of promises. And so that's what he's planting in the minds of people who are saying, support me, I'll give you all these things. And Trump over here and all these people who don't like socialism, they just won't give you what you need. It is truly insidious.
Yeah, it's just pity. It's a classic old, you divide and conquer. You separate everybody out into as many little groups as possible, and then you tell them you're the only one on their side, so you can use them. Again, it's all, Lenin himself, who was just a master strategist, said, he goes, all Marxism is using people to get what you want. And anyone that doesn't understand that does not understand a grain of Marxism. It's never about the people. It's never about the minorities or the little disenfranchised groups. It's about how can you use them to get the power you want so you can be in control. That's all it is. So they always promise anything to anyone to get them to vote for them. Whether
Absolutely.
They'll deliver or not. They don't care about the delivery. They care about getting the vote to get the power. And so the Democratic Party has been captured a decade or two ago in the 90s by the radical Marxist. And if you study the key people, like my first film goes in all the key people that were literally part of the communist apparatus that were in cabinet positions of Obama's.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, two of his czars, if people will remember, when they were asked, who do you admire most as a world leader? They said Mao Zedong, a man that slaughtered 70 million of his own people. And they said that's who we admire most. That's how radical these people are. That wasn't radical to them. Because in their thinking, if you have to eliminate 70 million people that are troublemakers and won't go along with this great system, that's okay. There's no problem with that.
Right,
So
right. Okay, I'm so glad we're talking about all of this, and I've used the expression on the show that the difference between socialism and communism is just socialism with no way out. You've eliminated all escape. You have eliminated you now have control and you can't get away. But communism is using socialism as their economic system. There's just no way out because they have eliminated all political opponents. I do want to turn though and talk about Agenda 2, your newer movie, and one thing your second movie, I understand, traces issues and kind of gets through issues back down to helping people see them as they are just being pushed by the left through the lens or for the purpose of developing and pushing Marxism. Is that an accurate?
That's right. Just showing how the issues are. One of the famous leftists of the 60s said, the issue is never the issue. Yeah. The issue is always the revolution. And so I go through a lot of the key issues like the environmental movement and other movements that are going on today to show you behind the scenes the key people and groups and what they're even saying where it has nothing to do with that issue. It's about getting power and control. Okay,
I'm going to have Derek the Very Wonderful. We have a short clip from your second movie, Agenda 2. This is a clip from the trailer, which is itself is a clip. Short little clip to introduce Agenda 2 to our listeners. If you could please, Derek.
You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance.
If America goes down economically, it will go down militarily. If America goes down militarily, we all go down. The free world is finished, and it'll be finished for a very, very long time.
We're in the most critical period we've been since the Revolutionary War.
That concept of collectivism, big government, is a magnet for the predator class.
When people are afraid, they ask government to do more, not less.
We have been the main stumbling block to world communism since it first raised its ugly head.
From the promotion of Islam to the propaganda of climate change, from the deceit of Common Core to the manufactured economic crisis, and from their manipulation of the evangelical church to the unsustainable debt burden. This film will show the issues are simply being used as a smokescreen to hide the purposeful, premeditated, treasonous attacks on the foundations of our freedom.
That, my friends, is a chilling little short clip of Agenda 2, just from the trailer itself. I love the idea of getting into issues and trying to explain how the left's position is really coming from a place of Marxism. And instead of, we can, if you'd like to have a quick summary of your film, that's fine. But I want to talk about, because climate change, I think, is one issue that the left is particularly successful in convincing people that we are just out to help and save the world. We're trying to protect you, and anyone who won't agree with us doesn't care about the climate. It doesn't care about the future. And when you try to say, but this is all about control, this is all about taking your money away, this is all about globalism, I think, sadly, many young people look at you and say, no, this is about saving the planet. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with Marxism. So tell us the connection, Marxism and climate.
Yes, so many key things. And what you need to tell young people, because we need to understand this issue because it's not going away. Yeah. You can't step down from saving the planet to some other issue. You'll lose your people because that's such a grand vision. Here's the facts. Today, currently, there's 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. That didn't mean anything to me, and it probably doesn't mean anything to you, except when you study what is the optimum level of CO2 in the atmosphere for everything that is green. Do you know what it is? It's 1,600 parts per million. We're at 1/4 of the optimum level of CO2 for everything that is green to thrive the best it can. And that's why greenhouse growers, they pump CO2 in their greenhouses and they double, triple, and quadruple the level so the plant growth explodes. And so the green movement has chosen to attack CO2, which is plant food. It's fertilizer for everything that is green. And we have to expose the very fundamental premise is a complete lie that defies science. And we're at the low part. I interviewed Dr. Patrick Moore, who is the co-founder of Greenpeace. Mm-hmm. He cares about the environment.
About him too, yeah.
Yeah, and he had to leave Greenpeace because he realized it had been captured by the Marxists and they were just trying to destroy world capitalism. And he said the things they're doing are actually hurting the environment. And he still cares about the environment. But so that one premise alone. So you go, why are they after CO2? When CO2, we need more CO2 in the atmosphere. We need to triple and quadruple the level if we want the rainforest to explode. An oak tree will grow to full size in half the time if you can do that to the CO2.
Wow,
half
okay.
the time. And plant growth efficiency, every time you double CO2, so if we could just go from 400 parts per million to 800 parts per million, plant growth efficiency increases 35%. So the same tomato plant will have 35% more tomatoes on it if you can double CO2. So you have more food, it's a complete lie, but that's what they're doing. But the reason they have attacked CO2 is because almost everything productive produces CO2, including human beings. And so they realize we've got to stop the productivity. They need poverty because poverty is easy to control. They've got to stop people being able to create wealth. And so all this is a movement to regulate and control people, get them to move into cities and live in multifamily dwellings so they can have better control of them. But they came up with this great idea. We're going to use the environment. And what's amazing is the very first paper on this was written by Karl Marx himself. The year he died, the last paper he wrote was on the environmental movement, how it needs to be used. He said, you need to scare people, and we're going to head into an ice age, and pollution from productivity is creating all the smoke and stuff, so it's going to make the earth get cooler, and we're all going to freeze to death. But he is the one that got this going in the system, and they've just
never knew that.
Yes,
Karl Marx wrote
Karl
about
Marx.
using the environmental
Yes,
argument.
and I talk
to
about
push
in the second film. It talks about the name of the paper and what he did. So no, this is a Marxist philosophy from the very beginning.
Well, the other aspect of it that just seems to always, I think should be more telling to people if they want to be open-minded about climate change, is how much the agenda that is pushed by the left related to climate change in some way or other demands higher taxes, redistribution of wealth through the United Nations. They have all sorts of language talking about people who've been left homeless by climate change. And you hear those things and you think, my gosh, it's gotten that bad? People have become homeless over it. There's no one who's become homeless over climate change. No. But you hear those things, and then and the other thing, and then I do want you to comment again, the other thing that is frustrating is it's actually a brilliant choice of a topic, because very few people are educated in climatology. Very few have taken, any climatology courses in college, and so you tend to defer to the alleged experts, and if they say this must be true, and then you don't question it, and then you salute to whatever the agenda is they have in mind.
That's right, and they've made it sound so virtuous, as they always do in every movement they have. The reality is between 5 and 10 million people are dying every year because of environmental policies. And those are primarily young black children in Africa and other impoverished areas, because they're not allowing them to develop because, oh no, you'll create CO2, not allowing them to have electricity so they can have refrigeration, so that every day they have to go get new food because they can't refrigerate. If you see what it is doing to the poor of the world, it's pushing them from hunger to starvation, and it is evil at its core.
I will confess I haven't seen Agenda 2. Is what you just covered in Agenda 2, that point?
Yes, some of that's in there. Dr. Timothy Ball, too, is a great environmental scientist. He has YouTube videos you can watch, Dr. Timothy Ball, on the science of it. And he's so fuming mad because he sees it's being used as an evil tool to hurt people and to hurt and control people. And here's the thing, we all want clean air, clean water, and we want to steward our resources. Everyone wants to do that, but that's not what this movement is doing. The Green Movement's not doing that. They're wasting all our energies on stopping productivity, which again, like I said before, we want more CO2. CO2 is good. We've been all brainwashed. It's at a low level, and we need to at least double it in the atmosphere, and then the productivity of plants will be much better for everybody.
The whole idea, I like that you make the point too about, because I think that one reason that people, young people or those who haven't focused much on this issue, don't want to question what the climatologists are saying, what the climate extremists are saying. They feel like they can't imagine what motive would cause those people, the climate activists, to lie about what is happening with climate change. There's no motive for them to lie, so why shouldn't they just be believed at face value and left alone? But you did, just a moment ago, articulate this idea. Yes, because it enables them to have more control, to urge people, as you say, move into concentrated areas in the city where you can be more controlled. And I'm sorry, back to Africa, you remind me of something. I was reading about the elimination of very effective pesticides. And it was an environmental claim that those pesticides would somehow had horrible, but the fact of not using them hurts crop development and therefore hurts people, hurts their ability to grow food.
And it spreads malaria all over the poverty of Africa. Malaria disease we abolished 70, 80 years ago in America. We had it in America too. People don't understand that, but we use DDT and some of those chemicals to kill the mosquito population and get it under control. And those books, Silent Spring and many of those in the 60s, they were all written by Marxist radicals. We know that now as we study their life. They were members of the Communist Party USA. They were in all these radical groups. So they didn't care about the environment either. They were using the environment to persuade the 60s radicals to jump on this bandwagon because they knew it would be very effective. And it has been very effective to control the world. See, they always wanted a one world government, the elitist, that or lust for power. And a one world problem like this requires a one world solution, they believe, which can only be done by a one world government. It's a perfect vehicle. I've been reading all their books since 1854, from Karl Marx writings forward. So I know their mindset, I know what they think, and they've been setting things in place for 150 years to manipulate people to voluntarily do what they've always wanted to do to us anyway, which is totally control us. And this environmental movement is so powerful because people, if they believe it's real, will do anything.
We'll do anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
And so and it's sad they're using it because there's so many things we could be doing, like managing our forests in America. I'm from out west in Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. We have some of the most beautiful forests in the world, and they're all dying now because we haven't been able to manage them in the last 30, 40 years because the environmentalists said, no, you can't go even pull the dead trees out.
Right.
And so we're losing our forests. So this environmental movement, that's what young people need to understand, it's destroying the environment. It's not doing all the energy that's going into these meaningless causes like cutting CO2 could be going into helping clean up our oceans and helping manage our forest, which is unlimited resource. Trees are the greatest resource. You can just keep planting them, and you have all you need. And they're saying, no, we can't touch. Man cannot touch the creation. Well, anyone knows, and when you leave a lot in any town, in any neighborhood to itself, what happens to it? The thistles, the thorn, it destroys itself. It just destroys itself. Man is needed to take care of the creation. That's why the person's house next door that takes care of it, the beautiful flowers, the green grass, they water it, they prune the trees, and it's a Garden of Eden. And when you take man out, it just implodes on itself. And they're saying man is the enemy when no, we are the solution to the problem. And we need to spread out of the big cities into the rural areas and take some dominion over the ground. And like our yard, we have gardens, we have trees, we have fruit trees. And we love doing that. And it's a blessing to everyone because you are stewarding things like you should.
Curtis Bowers, you are something. So Agenda 1, Agenda 2, if people want to get Agenda 2, how do they do that?
Go to agendadocumentary.com, and there's both trailers there and the movie's available. And the more you get, the cheaper they are because we want you to be able to get copies and give them to friends. This is a very important year in American history, as you know. That's what this whole show is about.
Yes,
it's about waking people up. We are on the cusp of going a completely different direction than we have. And if we go down that road, people have to understand we're going to get to where we're going. And it's nowhere new, like they're telling us. With history, we've been there over and over again. Just in the 20th century, we've been down the socialist road, in the National Socialist Party of Germany, and in the United Soviet Socialist Republics of the Soviet Union, and on, and it does not work. And it ends in slaughter of the very people they were promising all the freebies to. Those are the people they get hurt. And that's why we as conservatives need to stand up and love our neighbor by going, we have to educate them on this. We have to teach them the truth because this is going to hurt them. And I cannot allow them to be lied to and used to set up a system that will destroy them. And so that's why each person, one at a time, with one person at a time, needs to wake them up and needs to be involved with things like what you're doing here to educate others, because we have the truth, and the truth is very, very powerful.
Curtis Bowers, this was so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for coming in the
Thank
studio
you.
today. I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
Friends, I mean, what we're talking about just now, honest to goodness, there is so much at stake in this election cycle, and we have a certain, I don't know what the percentage is of millennials who buy into every single bit of the climate change argument, every single bit of the Bernie Sanders argument. But, we are, as I say so often on the show, every generation has their duty as patriots to this country, patriots who love America, to be the ones speaking up, sharing the truths, not permitting the left to define the issues and not permitting the left to put out their propaganda and letting it spread without people like you and like me and like everyone else involved in the conservative movement speaking up. It's one person by one person, talking to people, encouraging them, reminding people to be politically active, reminding them what's at stake in this election cycle. Because if we end up with Bernie Sanders, to go to Reagan's Ronald Reagan's remarks at some point. He talked about, if we lose America, we're into 1,000 years of darkness, and we are at that precipice right now. Really encourage you to get the movies we were just talking about, Agenda 1 and Agenda 2. I want to hit two other topics today. One was that